you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. They say there are parts of the Smoky Mountains where maps don't help, places where the trails fade, compasses spin, and the woods decide whether you come back out. I didn't believe any of that when I went in. Not really. I was just a guy with a rucksack and an urn of my dad's ashes, looking for a quiet place to say goodbye. But the valley I picked wasn't quiet. It was watching me, and it was empty. I arrived at a town called Elkmere, Tennessee. If you try to Google it, good luck. It's a place with one gas station, a hardware store that sells more bear traps than nails, and a diner where everyone stops talking when the door opens. I asked the old man behind the counter for directions to Gear Hollow, a small, tree-choked valley I'd found in one of my dad's old trail journals. He wrote about camping there alone back in the 80s, said it was peaceful, untouched. When I mentioned it, the old man's smile dropped. "Ain't been folks down that way in a long time," he said. "Storm washed out the fire road years ago. Don't go that far anymore." I asked if the trail was still hikeable. He just looked at me and said, "If the woods don't want you, son, you'll know." I should have turned around right then. The hike started fine. Sun filtered through tall pines, bugs droned lazily, and for the first few miles I felt completely alone. No cell signal, no noise, just the quiet rhythm of boots on dirt and the rustle of the trees. Around mile 5, I passed an old ranger sign half swallowed by vines. It read, "Greer Hollow, 1.3 miles, and below that, someone had scratched, 'We hunt after dark.' I thought it was a joke. Teenagers maybe? The trail narrowed, the trees closed in, and the deeper I went, the stranger things became. I found rabbit carcasses hanging from branches, gutted, tied up with fishing line. I found a pile of rocks stacked in a circle around a child's shoe. And I found a tree with dozens of tiny handprints smeared in something browny red. Every part of me said to turn around, but I was almost there, and I needed to finish what I started. I reached the clearing where I planned to scatter my dad's ashes just as the sun dipped behind the ridge. It was smaller than I imagined, a narrow basin surrounded by steep hills, thick with trees that leaned too far in. I unpacked the urn and I set up a small fire, ate from a can of beans I didn't taste. And that's when I saw it. Just 20 feet from my fire, a length of wire stretched low across the dirt, glinting, tensioned. I followed it with my eyes and saw the mechanism, a spring-loaded snare trap rigged to yank something 10 feet into the trees. I hadn't set it, and it was new. I scanned the woods, my fire crackled, something shuffled behind the tree line. I stood up slowly, and a voice, low, male, and wrong, called from the darkness. "Camping out here, huh?" I didn't answer, I didn't move. Then something whistled, high, sharp, deliberate, from the opposite direction, and another voice whispered, "He's alone." I ran. Branches clawed at my arms. My breath came in ragged bursts. I didn't know where I was going, just away from the fire, away from the voices, and deeper into the hollow. Behind me, I heard crashing, laughter, another whistle, footsteps running, but barefoot, slapping against wet earth, and then a scream, human, male, cut short. I turned around the bend in the path and I nearly fell into a pit, a deep trench dug by hand filled with sharpened sticks. At the bottom, something moved, twitched. It was the guy chasing me, or had been. I didn't stop, and just before dawn, I found shelter, or I thought I did. An old hunting cabin, half collapsed and covered in moss. I pried the door open and slipped inside. The air was damp and sour, and inside were dozens of backpacks, shoes, jackets, phones with cracked screens, and bones. Skulls arranged on a shelf like trophies, jawbones nailed to the wall, a crude map scratched into the wood floor covered in X marks. My clearing had one too. I backed out slowly, but a voice behind me said, "You weren't invited." I turned. He was huge, covered in mud, wearing what looked like a stitched together coat of denim and skin. His face was smeared with black ash, teeth filed to points, and he held a rusted axe like it was a part of him. I bolted. He chased me, laughing. I don't remember how long I ran, just trees, pain and heat in my chest. Then, suddenly, headlights. I collapsed onto a forest road in front of a park ranger's truck. He hit the brakes, jumped out, and I babbled every word I could manage. Cabin, traps, voices, hunting, bones. He nodded, calm, too calm. "You've had a rough night," he said. "We get people like you sometimes." He offered me water, said I must have eaten something bad, said maybe I hallucinated, said there weren't any cabins out here, no Gear Hollow Trail, no missing hikers, and then he reached for the radio on his belt and whistled. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. I don't know how I got out. I woke up in a hospital 2 days later. They told me I'd been found near the highway, dehydrated, in shock, no injuries, no record of being in the park system, no signs of the cabin. But the boots I'd been wearing, they weren't mine. They were made from stitched leather, human leather. And my name, it's not in the ranger's report, but the man they wrote about, the one they said was found wandering the highway, his name was already on the missing persons list, dated 1997. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. The first time I heard the whistle, I was 8. My brother Jason was 10. We were camping in Olympic National Park with our mum, pitching a tent not far from Lake Crescent, a place with still water and dense fog that never seemed to burn off even by midday. Jason and I shared a tent, and on the second night, sometime around 3 AM, I woke to hear him sitting up, listening. Then he whispered, "Did you hear that?" I didn't, not at first, but then it came, a long, descending whistle from the woods. Too far to be close, too weird to be a bird. It was sad, like someone calling for help in a language only animals understand. Jason said, "That's the whistler. Grandpa told me." I didn't know what that meant, and an hour later, he was gone. I woke up to an empty sleeping bag beside me and the tent flap hanging open. No sign of Jason. Mum called the rangers. Search teams combed the trails. They found nothing. No footprints, no scent, not even a broken branch. It was like he dissolved into the fog. I told them about the whistle, and one of the rangers froze. His face changed, subtly, like I said something you're not supposed to say out loud. Then he leaned in and muttered, "You sure it was descending?" That was the only time anyone ever acknowledged it. Jason was never found. He was declared dead 2 years later. My family never camped again. 20 years later, I never really moved on. How could I? I read every article, every Reddit thread, every hiker forum. Missing 411, vanishings, cryptides, folklore, and one pattern kept repeating. People in the Pacific Northwest hearing a descending whistle in the night, then disappearing without a trace. I didn't tell anyone when I went back. I just packed a bag and drove. Olympic National Park hadn't changed much. Still quiet, still misty, still watching. I brought a small tent and a digital voice recorder. I wasn't there to hike, I was there to listen. I set up camp near where we pitched our tent 20 years ago. It was different now, overgrown, the trail partly washed out. The air was thick with cedar and damp rot. I stayed awake until well past midnight. Nothing. Then, around 3:17 AM, just like back then, it came again. That whistle, long, slow, descending, like it was spiraling into the earth. I turned on the recorder and stepped outside. I shone my flashlight into the trees. The beam hit nothing but fog and pine trunks, but the sound? It was closer than it had been 20 years ago. Too close. Then I heard movement. Not branches breaking, not animals rustling. Footsteps. Human. Deliberate. Pacing between the trees just beyond the beam of light. And then I saw him. Jason. Or something that looked like him. He looked aged. Older than he should be, even with the 20 years. Skin greyed, hair patchy, clothes ragged, but still the same Nirvana hoodie he wore when he vanished. He stepped forward, just into the edge of the light, and smiled. His eyes were wrong, too wide, too glassy. There was no recognition in them, just patience. He opened his mouth and whistled. Not the same whistle I heard before. This was new. Faster, ascending, and the trees answered. From all directions, dozens of whistles rising like insects in chorus. Jason cocked his head, then said in a dry, crackling voice, "You came back." I asked him who he was, where he'd been, what had happened. He didn't answer. He just stared at me and smiled until I blinked and he was gone. I didn't sleep, I just walked, blind through the fog, guided by the whistles. They moved with me, always just ahead, always pulling. Eventually I found something I'd never seen marked on any map. A hill, low, round and smooth, unnatural in the way it rose from the forest floor, and on its side, a hole. Not a cave mouth, a tunnel, carved smooth, pitched at a perfect downward angle. And from inside, whistles, voices, and crying. I stepped inside. The tunnel was too smooth, the walls too warm. It was like walking into the throat of something massive. After what felt like hours, I came to a chamber, circular, lined with hundreds of shoes. Children's mostly, some adult, every one of them placed carefully on the ground. And in the centre of the chamber, tree, growing through the stone, leafless, with faces carved in every branch. Some I recognised. Jason, a woman from a missing persons poster I'd seen, and one more, mine, freshly carved. I don't remember getting out. I woke up in my car, back at the edge of the park, recorder still running, 12 hours of static and whistles, and one clear voice recorded at 3:38 AM, Jason's voice. "You came back, now we can trade." If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. But I hadn't been the same since. Mirrors twitch, dogs growl at me for no reason, and sometimes, when I sleep, I wake up covered in pine needles and soil. There's a whistle I can't get out of my head, long, slow, descending, and when I hear it, I smile. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. I worked as a seasonal park ranger in Yosemite for 4 years, mostly summer shifts, sometimes in the fall. I was stationed near Tuolumne Meadows, a place known for its alpine beauty, granite domes, and long, winding trails that vanish into miles of untouched forest. It was the kind of place that silences you, makes you feel small in the right way, until it makes you feel small in the wrong way. This happened in my final season. I never went back after this, and I never will. It started with a pattern. 3 separate hikers reported seeing the same thing, and they didn't know each other. All described an old cabin about 5 miles off the main trail. No signs of life, no ranger tags, no obvious path leading to it. They described the same warped, black wood, the same half-buried chimney, the same symbol carved into the door, a circle with something like a maze or a spiral inside it. Here's the thing, there aren't any cabins in that area, none we're aware of anyway, and certainly nothing matching that description. We logged the reports and sent them up the chain. The higher-ups shrugged, said maybe someone built an illegal structure, or maybe the hikers were just mistaken. Then a man went missing. Name was Garrett Weaver, 32, a trail runner, fit, smart, not reckless. He left a note in his car that said, "Going for a sunrise jog, back by noon." He never came back. No signs of struggle, no prints past a certain point, no calls, texts or distress beacon, just gone. Search and rescue found his footprints heading off trail towards the area where the cabin had been seen, then nothing, just dirt, like the ground itself wiped him away. And that's when I got obsessed. On my next shift, I left camp early and hiked into that region alone. I told no one. I took a GPS, extra batteries, and a body cam clipped to my vest. The air changed about 5 miles in. You learn to read the forest as a ranger, when something's hunting, when weather's about to shift, when a place feels wrong. This felt like static in the bones. The trees were too still, the bird song stopped, and then I saw it. A blackened cabin nestled between boulders, leaning to one side. No trail, no chimney smoke, no signs of age, but no signs of life either. Just wrongness, like it had always been there or never had. The door had that spiral symbol carved into it, deep, like it had been scratched by something with claws. I don't remember opening the door, I just remember being inside. It was bigger on the inside. I know how that sounds, but it's the only way I can describe it. From the outside, it was maybe 15 by 15 feet, and inside, it was a full 2-story house. Wooden floors warped like waves, always that didn't make sense. Windows that looked on skies that weren't ours. Blood-red clouds, swirling lights, constellations I've never seen. And the photos, they were everywhere. Polaroids nailed to the walls, hundreds. Some black and white, some colour, all showing people mid-scream. Some of them were wearing modern hiking gear, some looked like they were from the 1950s, and one of them looked like Garrett, and one of them looked like me. I stumbled backwards and I found myself in a stairwell I hadn't seen before, descending, spiralling, like it went on forever. I heard breathing, but not from one thing, from many, in perfect sync, like a hive. I ran, but no matter how far I went up or down, I always ended up back in the same hallway. Eventually I found a room I hadn't seen before, windowless, lit by flickering lanterns, and on the walls were names, hundreds, maybe thousands, carved into the wood. Some were old, some were still bleeding, like they'd been carved that day. My name was on it, but not just once, 5 times. Same handwriting, same letters, each one carved deeper. The door behind me opened, not creaked, opened. I didn't wait to see who or what was behind it. I threw myself out through a window, I landed hard, and I ran until my lungs screamed. The cabin was gone. I looked back once, just trees, no building, no path, no symbols, just normal forest, like nothing had been there. When I got back to Ranger HQ, I didn't say anything. I reviewed my body cam footage, all normal, until the cabin. Then it just cut out. 15 minutes of static, then a shot of me sleeping in my tent from an angle above my head. A shot I didn't record. I tried to report what happened, was told to take a leave of absence. My supervisor said, "You've been under a lot of stress, maybe you imagined it." But a week later, a new hiker went missing. Same area, same story, gone without a trace. And when I looked at the missing poster, I saw something faint. Behind the photo, barely visible, burned into the paper like a watermark. A spiral. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. But I don't think the cabin ever let me go. I still dream about it, still hear the synchronized breathing in my walls. And last week, I found a Polaroid in my mailbox of me, standing in the forest, mouth open, eyes wide, screaming. If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. He radioed for a helicopter, but they never came. For 2 weeks, he rationed what little food he'd packed and then hoped for the best. I first heard of Carl McCunn from an old ranger named Watkins, whose voice still trembled recounting the case. He was a wildlife photographer, Watkins said, leaning on a desk thick with search and rescue logbooks. Smart guy, university degree, gear cost more than most cars, but he underestimated the bush. In April 1981, Carl chartered a small Cessna to drop him off on a remote creek bank 60 miles north of Fairbanks, beyond any marked trail. He said he wanted solitude to capture migrating caribou, clear photos, no packs of tourists trampling the tundra. But in all his planning, he forgot the most essential: how to get out. He booked a round-trip flight with pilot Ray Jennett, knowing Jennett would return for him in 2 weeks. But when Jennett flew back, weeks after Carl's departure, weather and mechanical issues delayed him. Then the company found they never confirmed the return booking. No slot on Jennett's log, no flight plan filed, no contract. By the time the Rangers mobilized the search, April's midnight sun had melted into May's endless daylight. But daylight meant nothing without supplies or shelter. Carl's last radio message came 9 days in. He sounded calm, joking about polar bears photobombing his shots. But behind the laughter, Watkins noted the static hummed differently, long pauses, strained breaths. Day 9, the log read, no extractor plane, food half gone. Matt Cunn had packed 10 days worth of freeze-dried meals and a single shotgun for defense. He stashed his gear in an abandoned trapper's cabin. A rickety log leaned to what Watkins described as one step up from a pile of sticks, but spring rain rotted the roof. Rainwater pooled into a sleeping bag. By week 2, Carl burned pages of his diary in the stove to stay warm. "Don't know which hurts more," he wrote on April 22nd, "the cold or the dread." His last entry, April the 25th, was a single line: "I think I've packed everything." No mention of hope, no mention of rescue. The park search and rescue team flew with Jennett on May the 1st. Watkins still recalls the moment they spotted lean to roof through broken clouds. "We flew low," Watkins said. "Saw a shotgun propped by the door, his pack inside. No body, just footprints leading into scrub willows, and stopped abruptly." They searched on foot. No sign of Carl, no discarded gear, no tracks through snow or mud. The footprints vanished as though swallowed by the land itself. Watkins closed his eyes. The worst part, we heard, faintly, his radio crackle. "I'm moving south, following the creek," and then nothing. Watkins and SAR manuals agree. A man in survival clothing, 3 pounds of rations left, can last maybe 2 or 3 days, more if he forgoes. But in that scrub willow maze, thick brush, hidden holes filled with freezing meltwater, movements were slow, energy spent high. Carl's only protein source was a handful of fish he caught in glacier pools. Rain turned both midday and midnight to one unending grey. Temperatures dipped to 25 Fahrenheit, wind tearing at any exposed skin. By Carl's own account, each day felt like two. His shotgun made him feel safe, but bears hibernate in spring, wolves keep distance from humans but feast on carrion. No natural predator, it seems, got him. It was the elements, the creeping cold, the endless trudge through mud that sucked boots off. Rangers pieced together Carl's final likely route. He left the lean-to on April the 27th, heading south along a tributary of the Colleen River. His search reached a gravel airstrip used by hunters in summer 50 miles away. Watkins sighed. Too far, but he was desperate. Evidence, a shattered film canister 2 miles from the lean-to, his camera gear tossed aside. Then a belt buckle, a breakfast spoon, 3 shotgun shells, all within a 10-mile radius. The last trace, a single set of footprints in mud flat, leading into a shallow glacier creek. They descended into icy water, then trailed 50 feet under, then vanished. No body, no struggle, nothing. Watkins' voice cracked. He waded in, I think. Thought he could cross and got swept away under the ice. Nobody ever saw or heard of him again. Carl was declared dead in November 1981. His body never found, but his film survived. Janet returned later, recovered the camera from the lean-to. Developed film showed hunting images, ice-fogged valleys, solitary caribou ghosts, a blurred silhouette Carl snapped of himself, standing waist-deep in water, camera held high, stare lost. Watkins refused to look at the last frame. It's like he knew he was done, he said. The Officer Ranger report, redacted in 82, notes, cause, exposure and drowning, accident, no evidence of foul play. Even so, no one truly knows what happened under that ice. Every spring, a search team revisits the lean-to. Ice warms the mud, water recedes, new clues vanish, old clues dissolve in the sun. In 2005, a hunter found 3 bone fragments, too small to ID, analysis inconclusive. In 2018, a survey drone recorded a tougher parka fur on a distant slope, and nothing else. Rangers whisper that Denali's wilderness doesn't forgive. One wrong step, one missed call, one failed booking, and you become part of the park's ghost stories. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. Carl McCunn didn't, but each spring, when the ice cracks and the flow returns, I swear I can still hear his camera shutter echoing through the tundra. If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. We heard her screams in the swamp, then nothing. When we waded in, we found only blood and broken reeds, and a set of tracks that shouldn't belong to any animal. I first met Ranger Lopez at a swamp patrol station of Highway 41. He was the one who answered our call in July 2017. You don't have to call us in for a cottonmouth bite, he said gravely. What's really wrong? The scenario: 3 friends, Julia, Mark and Emily, camping on a remote hammock island miles from any road. They hiked in via kayak, leaving their car at a ranger checkpoint. They were seasoned campers, no novice mistakes. They carried bear cans for food, wore long pants against mosquitoes, and kept a satellite phone for emergencies. Then, on night 2, they heard screams. Julia described it later to Lopez. It sounded like someone being strangled, a high-pitched, gurgling cry, lasted maybe 10 seconds, and then silence. They rushed to the swamp's edge, headlamps slicing through mangrove roots and knee-deep water. I waded in up to my waist, Mark told Lopez. The water was cold. I saw reeds snap like toothpicks and bright red spots across the muck. Blood. But Julia's boots were gone, Emily said. She'd waded out barefoot. They called her name. No answer. Paddled the kayak around the hammock. No sign. By dawn, they checked every mangrove alley within half-mile. No Julia. Ranger Lopez arrived with a Highclere Marsh Patrol, the only team brave enough. They scanned the mud with UV lights. Blurred splatters, sure, Lopez said later, voice low. But the tracks, that's what got me. He sketched them. 3-foot-long, diamond-shaped scales, half-inch gaps between. Not her boot, not an alligator's track. A snake's, a massive python. Everglades had a booming invasive Burmese python population by 2017. Some estimated 30 to 100,000 adults, but no documented python attacks on people until Julia. Back at the station, Lopez pulled out case files. 2013, hikers found half-gnawed hog remains in a canoe, python coils nearby. 2015, small dog disappeared on Hammock Island. Owner recovered muddy, python scale marked prints. 2016, boy rescued from a canal, constrictor marks on torso, never officially reported. Each time, rangers quietly destroyed the snake. No media, no press. But Julia's case was different. A person, no body, just blood and scales. 3 days later, Lopez led a marsh patrol back to the site at dawn. We have thermal scopes, he said, but the deeper you go in, the more dappled the heat. We lost her fast. They found her phone 200 yards from camp, screen shattered, waterlogged. They downloaded last photos, a selfie, a Julia smiling in the tent, a shot of the canoe tied at dawn, a final image, her boot, half buried in muck, scales glinting behind. Then, no images of the swamp itself. Lopez's team fanned out. At midday, one ranger stumbled on a python track leading into a deeper marsh. They trailed it a quarter mile until reaching a shallow pool. We waded in, Lopez said, found her DSLR bag floating, lenses smashed, and the blood, pools of it. No Julia, no remains. Lopez's official search and rescue report dated July 22, 2017 reads in part, suspected constrictor attack, no remains recovered, witness accounts confirm large snake presence, pathogenesis of disappearance suggests pythality and subsequent submersion of remains, but the team found more, disturbed logs up to 5 feet long, signs of extreme force, broken reeds woven in a crude ring like a trap set to contain a large animal. A small campsite downstream, new footprints as if someone had taken her bag and walked away. Lopez mused, if it was only the python, why the footprints? Who else was there? Julia's disappearance rattled the park. Families demanded closure. Invasive species programs, python hunts. Later that year, rangers eradicated over 2,000 pythons in hunts, but still, footprints of those rare, massive snakes remain hard to identify. Lopez still patrols the swamp. He says at night, on a full moon, he sometimes hears a hiss echoing through the sawgrass. And if you check the case files, Julia's remains are still listed as missing. Even now, some YouTube survival channels speculate, could a 15-foot python drag her under the roots, or something else stalking the swamp? If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. Julia never came out, but every gator eye in the grasses seems to follow my flashlight, and sometimes I hear a whisper in the reeds, a soft, wet hiss. If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. He leaned over the geese railing, felt a shove in the small of his back. No one was behind him. He plunged into boiling water. Our story begins with three friends, Mark, Elena and Carlos, all in their late 20s, lifelong outdoor types who set out in June 2004 to hike a week-long loop in Yellowstone's backcountry. They backpacked together in the Tetons, Glacier and the Olympics. This was their first trip through the thermal basins. They arrived at the Lewis Lake trailhead under bright skies, the air crisp with lodgepole pines. Their packs were heavy, tents, stoves, bear spray, electronics minimal. They planned to stay on established backcountry campgrounds, avoiding the boardwalks and the crowds of the upper Gason Basin. On day 3, they left Bridge Creek Camp for Mystic Falls, aiming to skirt Norris Gason Basin at dawn. They'd studied the ranger maps, noted safe crossing points, and reviewed thermal activity notices, but nothing prepared them for what their encounter. Evening of day 3, they pitched camp near Swan Lake, far from any designated site, sake of solitude. Carlos, the most experienced, built a fire while Mark and Elena filtered water. They swapped stories about geyser eruptions they'd seen, laughed about who would shave first on the trip. The mood was light. At around 9 PM, Carlos poked at the embers and said, "I heard something near the creek, splashing." He grabbed his headlight and waded out into darkness. He returned pale-faced. "Must have been a bear," he said, wrangling out his pants, "but it walked upright, like a man." He laughed it off, but neither Mark nor Elena slept well that night. By 6 AM, they were packed and on a trail towards Norris. The sun filtered through steam rising from unseen vents, swinging fractal light across the boardwalks. Though they were off boardwalk on a maintenance trail, they followed caution signs. They emerged at an unmarked lookout above a boiling mud pool. Mark, ever the photographer, sat his camera over the railing and knelt to capture the swirling cauldron below. Elena and Carlos leaned close, marveling at the sulphurous steam. Then Mark glanced up. He felt a thud in his lower back, a gentle push, maybe 2 fingers pressure. He stumbled forward. Elena grabbed his arm. He saved himself, but as he did, he heard a faint laugh, like breath through dry reeds. He spun, ready to blast the bear spray cone, but saw nothing. No person, no animal, just steam and a shimmering basin. They continued along the edge, nerves raw. Carlos joked about an angry ghost of Yellowstone, but Mark's smile was forced. They reached a second overlook, this one above a geyser vent in 200 Fahrenheit water. Mark knelt again for photos. Elena filmed on her camcorder. Carlos leaned on the railing behind Mark. Suddenly, bunk. Stronger this time. Mark flew forward, arm striking the railing. He twisted his left wrist on impact, pain seared. He looked up, heart pounding. Carlos was nowhere behind him. Elena's camera fell as she ran back. "Carlos!" she screamed. Mark held his wrist as Elena peered over the railing. Below, a perfectly round depression of clay and steam. No sign of disturbance beyond Mark's fallen tripod. Carlos had vanished. Elena and Mark radioed park headquarters. Rangers arrived within an hour, fast for backcountry. A squad of 4 rangers combed the boardwalk and the forest edge. They found Carlos's boots neatly placed side by side at the railing, his day pack zipped open, water bottle missing. No footprints on the clay bar around the geyser, despite the fresh rain. No blood, no struggle, no bear prints. Ranger Thompson's report. Subject last seen kneeling at railing. Witness describes feeling a shove. No other ranger or visitor in vicinity, no mechanical failings or railings defects. They expanded the search grid, even draining small runoff streams, setting up thermal cameras, all night, all day, no Carlos. For weeks afterward, Mark and Elena returned to that spot, bringing flowers, photos of Carlos, messages in the mud. Mark insisted the railing was solid, no loose boards, no gaps. Elena heard whispers in the steam, "Help me," but wind obscured voices. Months later, a hunter found Carlos's day pack 1.8 miles north in a meadow untouched by thermal activity. Inside, journal entries, camera memory card, but no cameras. Boot prints around it, but one boot was missing. Rangers tested DNA on boot fragments, definitely Carlos's, but nothing else was found. Yellowstone's internal investigation concluded unexplained disappearance, possible accidental fall into thermal vent, though no remains recovered, no evidence of foul play by third party. Rangers implemented stricter barriers and signage that season, boardwalk extensions, sensors on certain vents, but no closure. The trail remains open. Visitors stroll freely where Carlos fell. Mark refuses to return. Elena leads guided hikes and warns clients of the push. She recorded 3 audio clips on her phone late at night when steam cools. The first, a soft thump like fingers on a door. The second, a snarl, animal or mechanical. The third, a whisper, "Not here." They replay the same site on maps in digital laser scan. The railing appears pristine, no cracks, no human presence, just the earth, the steam, and the unnerving drop into boiling water. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. Carlos never resurfaced, but sometimes, when I pass a hot spring, I feel a hand at my back and I pray it's not too late to step away. If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. He told his family he'll be back by dawn. Rangers found his pack and boots, but no body, not a trace. The backcountry of the Great Smokies draws hikers with promises of ancient forests, mist-cloaked ridges, and the chance to conquer Mount Lakota. In August 1973, Arthur Jenkins, 29, decided to make that climb alone in one day, trailhead to summit and back before sunrise. Arthur was an experienced day hiker, trail runner even. He mapped out the route, start at Alum Cave, ascend 3,700 feet and shoot sunrise photos from cliff top, descend via Rainbow Falls and return by midnight. He told his parents at a family barbecue, "Don't wake up, I'll be home by dawn." But by 4 AM, no Arthur. By 6 AM, his parents called park headquarters. Ranger Miller led the search party at first light. They combed the Alum Cave trail, marked, well trodden, finding no sign of Arthur. They expanded north towards Cliff Top. At 9 AM, they found his day pack on a shaded ledge 500 feet from the summit. Pack unzipped, camera missing, wallet inside, boots neatly placed beside the pack, laces untied, a half-eaten granola bar, a single Polaroid en route. Arthur perched on a rock, waving at the lens, backdropped by morning mist. Below that photograph was scrawled in ink, "Keep going." Ranger Miller frowned. He could have taken a break, but leaving boots behind? That's rare. Miller's team scrawled the marked route. No Arthur, no tracks, grass and leaves untouched. It was as if he stepped off the trail into thin air. They followed faint impressions of bare footprints leading towards an unmarked game trail, a deer path weaving into thick plants. It vanished after 50 yards. Miller radioed for tracking dogs. They arrived at noon. A German shepherd named Scout picked up his scent. then lost it at a fallen log. No crossing, no disturbance, just logs as old as memory. That afternoon, Miller charted a larger grid. A helicopter buzzed overhead. Spotters reported no sign. Then, at 3:15 p.m, Scout darted across a clearing and stopped. There, half buried in a bed of ferns, was Arthur's camera. It's an R4x5 view camera, heavy metal, its lens cap off as if recently used. The film inside was intact. When developed later, the film revealed a shot of cliff top at golden hour, trees lit in fiery orange, a second frame of Arthur's face close to the lens, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. Frames 3 and 5, blank or obscured by water droplets, no photo of his descent. Rangers camped at the trailhead in shifts, fearing the mountain's nighttime predators, black bears, mountain lions, but no growls, no crashes, silence. By day 2, they widened the search to Caldwell Fork and Indian Creek trails. Volunteers hiked every spur. Pilots flew overhead with infrared cameras. No thermal hotspot, no sign of a body. On day 3, a ranger found a handwritten note inside Arthur's daypack pocket. Need to find what's calling me. Be back soon. It was dated that morning. Park officers scratched their heads. Arthur was never one for cryptic messages. Ranger Miller wrote in his log, suggests he ventured purposely off trail, possibly chasing something. Animal? Light? A vision? Recommended caution for future services in unmarked territory. 11 days later, a group of Boy Scouts retraced the deer path, part of an Eagle Scout merit project. They found a makeshift shelter, 4 fallen saplings propped against a boulder and branches woven as cover. Inside, Arthur's socks, neatly folded. A half-eaten apple, tiny footprints, no bigger than a toddler's. A line of small stones leading into a narrow fissure into the rock. Rangers pried open the fissure, mere inches wide, darkness beyond. They didn't enter. Miller again. Too tight. Could be a claustrophobia borehole. Searched outside perimeter. Nothing more found. Decades later, Arthur's disappearance remains a top cold case in the park. No remains, no conclusive theory. Visitors still hike to cliff top, leaving small tokens at the ledge. A compass here, a pocket knife there. At night, near that deer path clearing, hikers report a soft voice calling their name. Footsteps behind them, but never catching a figure. And a sudden drop in temperature, even in the summer. Ranger Miller retired in 1995 but returns each August, placing a Polaroid of Arthur, smiling, waving, in a small shrine near the trailhead. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. Arthur never returned, but on misty mornings, I still swear I see his figure on cliff top, watching, waiting. If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. We unlocked the cabin, dropped our bags, started the fire, but he was already inside. We just didn't know until 3 AM, and by then, it was too late. My girlfriend and I booked the cabin to get away from everything. Jobs, phones, noise, stress. It was her idea. Katie had found it on a cabin rental site that featured remote, off-grid stays, the kind that only has wood stoves and chemical toilets. The ad said, Bitterroot backcountry hideaway, no neighbours for miles. That part sold us. We drove from Missouri for 2 hours, most of it on winding dirt roads. By the time we reached the turnoff, we hadn't seen another car for over an hour. We passed a locked gate, then climbed another 3 miles of steep, pine-dense terrain. Finally, we saw it. A 2-story log cabin tucked into a clearing, metal roof, wide deck, quiet as death. Katie grinned and said, "Perfect murder cabin, huh?" She was joking, but that sentence would stick with me. We unlocked the door using the code the owner texted us earlier that morning. It opened easily. Inside, everything looked just like the photos. Rustic, clean, charming. The first thing I noticed was the warmth. The cabin should have been ice cold. It was mid-November and the snow flurries had followed us the last 20 minutes of the drive. But the interior was room temperature. Katie thought maybe sunlight through the windows had warmed it up, but the floorboards were warm too. Even the stove top felt recently used. We dropped our bags and built a fire anyway, then made dinner, canned stew and boxed wine. That night, we laughed about how creepy the woods felt and how off-grid we really were. No service, no Wi-Fi, no neighbours. It felt thrilling. Then around midnight, we heard the footsteps upstairs. We'd gone to bed early, small mattress, thick wool blankets, the firelight glowing orange against the walls. I woke up to the sound of someone walking slowly across the floor above us. Heavy steps, creaking boards. 1, 2, pause. 3, 4. I sat up, blinking. There was no upstairs bedroom. The cabin had a second level, yes, but it was just storage space. The owner had said it was sealed off. No interior stairs, just a pull-down ladder on the outside. So what the hell was walking around up there? I shook Katie awake. "I hear it too," she whispered. We sat in silence. The footsteps stopped. Then, a faint thump, like someone dropping to their knees. I grabbed the fire poker and stepped outside barefoot, shivering. I circled around the side of the cabin. The exterior ladder that led to the second-story hatch was pulled down. I pointed my flashlight up. The hatch was open, not just unlatched, wide open, with dark space inside. But I couldn't see movement, no sounds. Still, the ladder being down. That wasn't from the wind. I climbed up 3 steps and then stopped. I wasn't armed, I wasn't stupid. I backed down and returned inside. Katie wanted to leave right then, but the car was parked down the slope and the snow had just started sticking. We compromised, stayed up together with the fireplace stoked and the fire poker beside us. By 3:30 AM, we were still sitting by the fire. And then we heard the toilet flush. The bathroom was 5 feet from us, a tiny space behind a sliding door. Neither of us had gone in for an hour, and now we both heard it. Flush, creak of the floor, soft shuffle. I stood and slid the door open fast. Empty. The toilet seat was up, water still swirling. Katie said she was going to be sick. We packed our bags in under 3 minutes and agreed to sleep in the car. We threw on boots, jackets, everything we could carry, and stepped outside. That's when Katie whispered, "I locked that. Why is it open?" The car, the driver's door was wide open. We froze, then ran, not to the car, to the tree line, away from the cabin, into the dark. I don't even remember running, just the blur of bark and branches. We eventually found a dry dip in the forest floor and huddled there until sunrise. No talking, just holding each other. When the sun came up, we walked back. The car door was closed, cabin door wide open. On the porch, something new, a cup of coffee, still steaming. We drove to the nearest gas station and used the clerk's landline. I called the cabin owner. He picked up on the first ring. I told him what had happened, about the footsteps, the hatch, the open car. There was a pause. Then he asked, "You said you arrived yesterday, Saturday, yeah? That's impossible. I didn't update the calendar yet. The key code isn't supposed to work until next week." I felt sick. It worked. It shouldn't have. Then who was in the cabin before us? He paused again. No one. It's been empty for 3 months. The last renter left after hearing someone breathing under the floorboards. We went home and tried to put it behind us. But a week later, Katie was folding laundry when she found something strange in the corner of the dryer. A coat. Not mine, not hers. It was a thick men's canvas jacket, worn, dirty. Inside the pocket was a disposable camera. We got it developed. 10 photos. 8 were blurry shots of the trees. 1 showed our car. The final photo was of us, sleeping by the fire from inside the cabin. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it, but sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night and listen for footsteps above me, because I never saw his face and I never locked the hatch when I left. If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. My friend said he heard voices behind the wall. By night 3, he was whispering back, but there was no one there, or so we thought. It was mid-October 2022 when my college roommate, Sam, and I headed to his family's old hunting cabin near Lake Placid. The place had been abandoned since his uncle's passing. We planned to clear the brush, fix the roof, and spend the weekend off-grid. We arrived at noon. The cabin stood silent among oats, paint peeling, windows clouded. Inside, layers of dust, spiderwebs, shattered tools. We fired up the generator, unloaded supplies, and set to work. By sunset, we patched holes, replaced boards, and built a fire. We slept in army cots, I on the left, Sam on the right. He snored softly. I drifted off. Around 1:47 AM, I jolted awake to Sam murmuring, "They're asking for me." I sat up. His eyes were open, glazed. "Who?" I whispered. He turned towards the wall. "The ones in the wood." I thought he was dreaming. I shook him. No response. He sat up, pressed his ear to the log wall, listening. I grabbed my phone. No signal. I touched his shoulder. He jumped, startled. "Don't move," he said quietly. "They'll hear you." Morning light felt weak. Sam wouldn't speak of what he heard. We agreed to keep working, lift plaster, check for rot. Behind old insulation, we found scratch marks, thin, vertical, like fingernails. I asked Sam if he'd made them. He shook his head. "Listen." A faint thumping echoed, wood on wood, coming from inside the log wall. "It's a hollow crawl space. Someone's been in here." We pried at the floorboard. Beneath lay a narrow cavity, just enough for a small person. We strained to see, but the hole went dark. That night, Sam refused to sleep. He perched on the cot, headphones on, recording audio. I dozed lightly, until at 2:11 AM, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I woke. He was gone. Panicked, I jumped down, grabbed my flashlight and called his name. No answer. Then I heard him on the walkie I set to a low channel. "It's okay. They're friendly." His voice, though I'd only left the device in my pocket. I followed the footsteps to the back wall. The hollow thumps grew louder, faster. "Come join us." I wrenched open the last floorboard. A dark shaft stared back. Sam's boot sat at its lip. "Don't do it," I yelled. "Don't go in." His head appeared above the board. He smiled, a blank, distant grin, and disappeared. I never saw him again. I fled to the nearest ranger station with the walkie. They dusted the crawl space, found no footprints, no fabric. They let me record the audio, playback, faint creaks at 2:09 AM. Sam's voice, "They're calling me." Distant thump thump, a chorus of echoing whispers, "Join us, brother." Sam, "I'm sorry." Then silence. No sound of steps away, just static. A week later I returned alone, camera in hand. I searched every inch. No Sam, no sign of him. Then on the mantel, I found a Polaroid tucked beneath an old cap. It showed Sam, standing in the crawl space, his face lit by my flashlight. He wore a drawn expression, tears in his eyes. Behind him, the dark logs seemed to pulse. Some nights, I swear I hear a voice calling my name through the walls, and I wonder, did I leave him behind, or did someone else call him home? If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. My brother and I lifted the rug and found the trap door. It looked sealed for decades, but when it opened, we realized we never should have. I needed to get away. My brother, Evan, needed me more. After Dad died, he inherited the old family cabin. 2 stories, red shutters, the kind of place you drive past 100 times as a kid but never think your own. It sat on a gravel lane half a mile off the nearest road, deep in the Allegheny woods of northwestern Pennsylvania. No cell service, no neighbours, just pines so thick the sun never hit the ground. Evan and I planned a weekend there in late October, just to clear our heads, sort through Dad's things, perhaps decide what to do with the place. We arrived Friday afternoon. The cabin door was unlocked, as Dad always says, so the neighbours can pop in. But the neighbours haven't come in years. Instead, dust-covered furniture, stacks of National Geographic back to the 1960s, an old pool table in a corner, a placard Dad made hung by the fireplace. Our secret is safe here. Evan smiled, wiped a cobweb from the oak mantel and said, let's dig. The first night we built a fire, cooked sloppy joes and drank warm cider. I slept on a pull-out couch. Evan took the loft bed above. Around 2:17 a.m, I woke to a faint thump, like something heavy settling. I chalked it up to old floorboards, but then another, soft, deliberate, rhythmic. I sat up and listened. The loft ladder rattled, a drawer squeaked open. My heart pounded. I yanked on my jeans, grabbed my phone, no signal, and I climbed the stairs. Evan's bed was empty. The light above it, the one he always left on, was off. I saw a footprint in the dust, leading from the bed to the floor. Evan, I hissed, voice trembling. No reply. I followed the prints around the loft railing. They stopped at the far corner, where a heavy rug lay, folded under a paint can. My mouth went dry. Downstairs, I flipped on the hall light and pulled the rug fully aside. Beneath it, a trap door. The wood was old, scarred and darkened. It hadn't been opened in decades. I didn't want to, but I had to know what Evan saw. I grabbed a tire iron from the kitchen, wedged it under the edge and pried. The hinges groaned, dust puffed up. Underneath, a ladder dropped into total darkness. I texted him, "Trapdoor? You see?" No answer. Hey guys, have you ever found a hidden door in a place you thought you knew? Let me know in the comments. I swallowed, switched on my flashlight, pointed it down. Ladder rungs disappeared into black. I called his name. No echo, no reply, just the low hum of the old propane stove. I took the first rung. The wood creaked. I felt watched. My phone's light caught on something halfway down, glinting metal. A wire mesh grate, rusted, sealed above chest high, like a prison barrier. I dropped to my knees, peered under. The floor was stone. Saw what looked like clothes. Old clothes, piled. I stretched, slipped under, and shone the light. It was a narrow hallway, 6 feet long, makeshift crude concrete walls, thick beams overhead. At the end, a door, metal, dented, a padlock still intact. I tugged on it. Locked. I checked the hinges. Rusted but whole. The lock had been cut once then repaired. I heard a creak upstairs, like heavy boots. I froze. "Evan?" I whispered. No answer. I yanked the door open. A rush of cold air. Inside, a small room, floor dirt, and 3 wooden chairs arranged in a circle. On each, a set of clothes. Men's, women's, children's, every age, all stained and mildewed. A voice crackled on my walkie, though it was off. "Welcome." My blood ran cold. Then another. "We're waiting." I swung around, no one visible, just beams of my torch hitting dusty cobwebs. I shattered a chair arm with the tire iron and bolted up the ladder. By the time I kicked the trapdoor closed, I heard something heavy drop below. I grabbed my coat, ran outside, found Evan pacing the front porch in stocking feet. "Where were you?" he asked, voice tight. "Down there," I panted. "In the cellar." He shook his head. "There's no cellar, no trapdoor." My heart froze. I led him to the living room. Rug down, no trapdoor, just floorboards. He put his hand on my shoulder. "Dude, that's not here." I backed away, chest heaving. Outside, the pines swayed. Fog had rolled in. It felt thicker than before. We argued. I insisted. He grew angry. I stormed out, flashlight beam bobbing, transverse the clearing. No hatch, no ladder. Then I saw something, a dirt patch near the foundation. Fresh turned soil, no leaves. I knelt, scraped away. There, a rusted padlock ring half buried. I gloved up and yanked it free, attached it to my belt and ran back. Evan was gone, no footprints in the gravel. His phone and keys lay on the bench by the door. I scanned the woods, called him. Nothing. Morning came. I returned to town, reported him missing. Rangers searched 5 days. Found no sign. No footprints, no scrap of fabric. Just that lone ring of rust. Weeks later, I received a padded envelope, a single Polaroid paper. Inside, a photo of me, standing on the porch, taken at dusk. Then another, me kneeling over the dirt patch. Then another, a blurry hallway, an old circle of chairs and clothes. No note, no name. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. I never found my brother, but every so often I get a VHS tape in the mail. It's blank until you hit play. Then you see the trapdoor opening and someone climbing out. If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. On the second morning, we found photos tucked under the door. Pictures of us taken through the window while we were sleeping. And when we tried to leave, the car wouldn't start because someone didn't want us to go. My 3 college friends and I arrived at the cabin late afternoon in October 2021. We've been looking forward to a long weekend off-grid, no cell service, no distractions, just dark nights and crisp mountain air. The cabin was an old Forest Service retreat on the edge of Sequoia National Forest, built in the 1930s. 2 rooms, wood stove, solar lights, no Wi-Fi. We drove 12 miles down a dirt forest road that wound through giant trees, then a mile on a footpath to a clearing where it stood. A weathered pine log structure with a screened porch and a rusted tin roof. We unpacked, lit the stove and made chili in Dutch pots. Jokes about ghost stories turned into real unease as the sun sank behind the redwoods. Outside, the forest grew silent, like it was listening. Night 1 passed normally. We talked until midnight, then dozed off. I woke at 2:03 AM to the sound of something sliding across the porch floor. I opened my eyes to see nothing but a sliver of light from the stove illuminated a single Polaroid tucked beneath the door frame. I sat up and pulled it free. Through the flash, I saw a shot of me, sound asleep on my bed, exactly as I lay. My camera was on the table inside. No way anyone could have snuck up that close without us hearing. I nudged Jess, who groaned and turned over. We shrugged it off and left the Polaroid on the table, unresolved. Next morning, we searched the bushes around the cabin. No footprints, no signs of human passage, branches intact, no tracks in the soft earth. That afternoon, while gathering firewood, Sarah found another Polaroid wedged under the porch chair. This one showing Mark asleep on the floor, blanket pulled over his head. We huddled inside, unsettled. We decided to sleep in shifts and keep an eye on the door. We moved beds to face the windows, double-checked the locks. By 11 p.m, saw nothing. At 1:45 a.m, Mark heard a click, like a camera shutter at the window behind him. He grabbed the flashlight, flung the curtain back, and blank wall. No person, no camera, just dense redwood. By sunrise, tension was high. We packed for an early departure, but our car, parked at the trailhead 7 miles back, refused to start. The battery fine, turnaround cables untouched, fuel gauge full, spark but no ignition. We tried it again and again. At noon, we agreed to hike out and leave the car behind. As we grabbed our packs, a final Polaroid slid under the door. This one showing all 4 of us standing outside the cabin door, smiling at the camera, as if posed. We froze. The red hooded figure we'd never seen once appeared in the darkness behind us, face obscured, hands raised, camera in hand. We dropped our packs and ran through the woods as fast as we could. No trail markers, cursed lengthening pines, every snapped twig a scream. We reached the surface road at dusk, no car in sight. Someone had driven it off overnight. We cursed in panic and began walking the road down to the highway. A mile in, Sarah pointed at the trees. Along the road's edge, small flashes, camera shutters, went off rhythmically. We ran blindly until we saw headlights. A passing pickup truck stopped for us. We jumped in. The driver asked what happened. We told him the story. He frowned. "That cabin's been closed for years," he said. "Last guest found half a mile down, blabbering. Said something like, 'I knew you were there. I saw every picture.' They never found the others." He drove us to the station. We reported it. Search teams combed the woods, found our car, engine destroyed, doors pried open, dash smashed. No sign of us slipping Polaroids under the door. No sign of 4 of us ever being inside. A week later, I checked my email. No messages, until an unfamiliar address pinged me one photo attachment, a single scanned Polaroid. A photo of me, sitting at my desk at home, typing this story. My door is locked, security cameras show no one near my house, but at the edge of the frame, just above my monitor, are 2 red hooded eyes, watching. I never saw anyone, but I watched every photo develop and realised the cabin was never empty. If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. We drove down that gravel road, turned every corner onto the main highway, only to find ourselves back at the cabin 5 times, and with each loop, the woods got darker. It was early December 2023 when 5 of us, college friends from Seattle, rented the Elderwood cabin for a weekend. The listing boasted secluded mountain hideaway, no cell service, perfect for a digital detox. We arrived around 3 p.m, snow falling thin and fast along the Cascade foothills. The 6-mile forest track had been ploughed just enough to drive a 2-wheeled vehicle, but slick enough that our car fishtailed more than once. The cabin sat in a small clearing surrounded by ancient firs, a wood stove, single light bulb, and an old fireplace composed the interior. No Wi-Fi, no landline, no satellite. Ideal, or so we thought. Our group, me, Claire, Marcus, Jenny and Lewis, split chores. I chopped the woods, Marcus stoked the fire, Claire brewed coffee for the morning. By 8 PM, the stove warmed the room, and snow piled against the windows like a dome. We played board games by lamplight, laughed at old stories, and fell asleep in shifts. At 7 AM, we packed up to get breakfast from the main road. Car brought us around, doors locked, bags stowed. Marcus insisted on taking the same narrow track out we came in. 20 minutes later, we emerged on the same clearing. Confused, Marcus said, "That's not possible. We've gone north on Riverside Road." Lewis checked the GPS, no signal, but it showed our arrow stationary. Jenna Pale whispered, "We're back at the cabin." We all watched the log appear through the pines, exactly as before. We tried again, same track, same turns, back at the cabin. Loop 2, the snow was lighter, furs looked fresh. Loop 3, snow was heavier, tracks buried. Loop 4, a low fog rolled in. And Loop 5, trees had shifted, some torn, some bent. Nothing looked familiar except the cabin's lit window. Care sobbed, "We're trapped." We abandoned the car and marched on foot towards the highway, but the firs closed in, and every hour of us walking left us a quarter mile from the cabin, not the highway. Our watches spun, days blurred, food supplies dwindled. Each morning felt like the same dawn, and Jenna claimed she saw us playing the same board game again, as if we'd never left the night before. We marked the walls with tally marks, 56 loops. Marcus drew a crude map, we'd drawn tracks over and over, always leading back. At night, disembodied whispers echoed through the logs. "Stay with us, don't go." And footsteps in the attic. No attic existed. We barricaded doors with chairs, yet each sunrise we found them stacked neatly to one side. On loop 60, we woke to an earth-shaking crack. The forest trembled, a distant avalanche. We ran towards the sound. At first light, we burst out onto a paved Forest Service road, littered with abandoned cars and empty cabins. We flagged down a ranger. It was Sunday, 6 days after our arrival. No storms reported, no searches. When authorities finally reached Elderwood Cabin, the snow was untouched, no tracks, ours or the cars. Inside, the fire was cold, tally marks scratched into the table, 56 loops, a single message carved on the doorframe. We never left. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it, and sometimes, when I drive past that road entrance, it feels like the trees are shifting, waiting to lead me back. If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. People always think they understand the woods, that if you've got a map, a good pair of boots and a full battery, you'll be fine. But once you leave the trail, really leave it, you'll find there are places that don't want to be known. And if you keep going, sometimes they let you in anyway. In the fall of 2017, 4 of us decided to go on a backwoods camping trip in Kentucky, deep in Clay County. It wasn't part of the official Daniel Boone National Forest, it was an unmarked area north of Redbird. No cell service, no rangers, no groomed trails, just acres of dense pine, rocky hollows, and old stories that no one tells unless you're from there. We weren't. It was me, Josh, my girlfriend Liv, and 2 of our college friends, Marcus and Tori. We were all 24, used to short hikes and national park camping, but nothing like this. We heard about the spot through a guy on a Reddit hiking forum. He wouldn't say much except it's the most peaceful place you'll ever find. Just stay near the creek and don't go past the second ridge. That should have been a red flag, but we figured it was a locals only thing, territorial, secret fishing spots, that kind of vibe. We left our cars at a pull-off just outside of Manchester and hiked with packs. The forest was thick, dense trees that seemed older than the land around them. The air was still, too still. After 2 hours, we found the creek he mentioned. Cold, fast moving water with a steep rock wall on one side and a mossy flat on the other. It was beautiful, yeah, but even then, something felt off. Like we weren't alone, even though we hadn't seen a single person since the gravel road. We set up camp, built a fire, cracked open beers and talked under the stars. Then, around 9:40 p.m, we heard it. Whistling. Just 3 notes, long, low, rising. It came from the trees across the creek. We all froze. Marcus chuckled nervously. Someone out there? We called out. No answer. Then a few seconds later, from our left, the same 3 notes. Closer. Liv whispered, "Is that a bird?" It wasn't. There was a pause, a weird, heavy pause, like the whole forest held its breath. Then, to our right, the same whistle. That triangle of sound, one across the creek, one left, one right, surrounded us. I stood up and yelled, "Hey, we're just camping, we don't want trouble." Nothing, just wind in the trees. We didn't sleep well. In the morning, Liv and Tori wanted to leave. Marcus said we were fine, and I was on the fence. Around noon, we saw our first person, an old man in a busted truck, slowly driving the gravel trail near where we parked. He stopped and rolled down the window. "You kids in the woods?" We nodded. He shook his head. "Ain't wise, not this far back." "Why?" I asked. "Something we should know." He stared at us for a long time, then said, "You don't talk, they whistle. If you hear it again, don't whistle back." And he drove off. We decided to stay one more night, just to prove we weren't spooked. Dumbest decision of my life. That night, it started again, whistling. Same pattern, same triangle. Only this time, it moved, circled us, slowly. We sat frozen around the fire. The sound would vanish, then return from a new direction. Always 3 notes, always the same tone. Liv said her name, just once, and the whistling stopped. That silence was worse than the sound. Then, on the edge of the tree line, we saw someone. Only for a second, just a pale face, no shirt, just standing there, watching. Then it was gone. Tori started crying, and Marcus whispered, "We're leaving at dawn." No one argued. The next morning, the trail we took in wasn't there. I'm not kidding. The orange markers we tied to branches, gone. The downed birch tree we stepped over, not there anymore. It's like the forest had moved. We followed the creek downstream, hoping it would lead back to the road. It should have. Instead, it narrowed, turned rocky, and led us to a dead hollow, a wide basin of grey trees and rotten stumps. At the centre was a structure. Maybe once a cabin, now just a foundation of stones, and carved into one of the stones, 3 vertical slashes. That night, we tried not to light a fire. It didn't matter. The whistling came anyway, from every direction. Fast now, urgent, mocking. Tori broke. She screamed into the dark, "What do you want?" A moment later, we heard a whistle. Her exact scream mimicked in whistling form. It was the most wrong sound I've ever heard, like someone took her voice and twisted it through a flute made of bone. We ran. We ran until we couldn't anymore. found a clearing with an old hunting blind and crashed there. At sunrise, we heard a motor, the sound of a quad. A local hunter spotted us and drove us out. He didn't ask what happened. All he said was, "Y'all lucky, ain't many come out once they start whistling." Liv still won't talk about it. She won't go near the woods anymore. Tori moved back to New Jersey. Marcus, he went back a year later, alone. He never came back. I've been hiking alone for over a decade, from Colorado to Catskills, and nothing ever made me question that decision until West Virginia, specifically Monongahela National Forest near a place called Spruce Knob. It's remote, rugged and breathtaking, but just off the main trails are vast stretches of woodland that even rangers admit they haven't mapped completely. Old coal routes, they said, private logging land, just don't go too far off. I wish I listened. It was early October 2021. I'd taken time off work and wanted a few days in nature before winter. The plan was simple: 2 nights on a loop trail near Seneca Creek, solo camping with GPS, topographical maps and an offline trail app. I parked at the trailhead and hiked around 7 miles in the first day. The air was crisp, leaves just starting to change. I passed one couple heading out and I didn't see another soul the rest of the day. Around 4 PM, I found a perfect camp spot near the water. I set up my tent, cooked dinner and read until nightfall. That night was calm. No weird noises, no bad vibes. That came later. Around 11 AM the next morning, I broke camp and continued down the loop. I was supposed to head east, but somewhere along the way, I missed the marker. My GPS showed me about half a mile off course, but I wasn't worried. I could see I was close to where I needed to be. Then, I reached a crossroad. Not on the map, not on GPS, just a narrow path heading north, flanked by 2 upright stones that looked deliberate, carved, weathered. I stopped. The air felt different there, cooler, stiller, like sound didn't carry right. The forest was absolutely silent. I don't know why I did it, curiosity, maybe, or the way the path seemed inviting. So I turned onto the trail and walked north. After 20 minutes, the woods began to thin. Then I saw it. A town. Tiny, maybe a dozen buildings, all wooden and sagging with age. A church with a broken steeple, a general store with boarded windows, a large house at the far end with a wraparound porch and lanterns hung from its beams. There were no cars, no wires, no paved roads. It looked like something out of the 1800s. But here's the thing, it didn't look abandoned. There were curtains in the windows, smoke coming from one of the chimneys, a stack of chopped wood by the general store. Then I saw a man, middle-aged, wearing faded denim and a flannel, standing perfectly still near the porch of the church. He stared at me, then turned and walked inside. I called out, "Hey, is this private land?" No answer, just the wind and the creaking boards. I walked deeper into town, cautiously. The buildings were weathered but solid. I passed the house and saw someone standing inside. A woman, middle-aged, pale, just staring through the window. She didn't wave, didn't move. I knocked on the door of the store. No answer. I looked around again. Now there were 4 people, each standing near different buildings, all watching, non-moving. Then I noticed the identical table set outside several homes, each with 2 chairs, each with a plate, a fork and a glass, all empty but clean, like they were waiting for something or someone. I left quickly. The path I took in, it wasn't there anymore. I retraced my steps and ended up back at the same crossroad. I walked the perimeter of the town twice. Every way I turned, the woods just curved back towards the buildings. I tried GPS, dead. Compass, spinning. Phone, no signal, of course. But my battery dropped from 62% to 10 in minutes. I stayed at the edge of the town as the sun began to fade, debating whether to sleep in the woods. Then a bell rang from the church, low and metallic, just once. Every resident of the town turned to face the sound, and then, together, they turned to face me. I ran through the woods, over rocks. I scraped my hands and knees and I ran until my lungs burned. I found a dry hollow under a pine grove and huddled there with my knife in my hand. I didn't sleep. Around 2 a.m, I heard footsteps, crunching leaves, moving slowly, then stopping. Then the faint sound of someone breathing. I held my breath. After a while, it moved on. At sunrise, I made one more push back to the town. It was empty. I found an old journal inside the large house. Its pages were brittle but legible. The last entry was dated 1901. We remain as 12. We prepare the table for 13. The traveller who strays becomes the guest becomes the kept. There were pages before that, but they'd been torn out. I left it on the floor and got out of there. This time, the trail was back. When I got back to my car, a ranger was there, said he was checking a fire report. I asked him about the town, described what I'd seen. He went quiet, then said, "You must have been near Old Wheatley, logging town, burned down in 1912. Ain't nothing there now but stone and ash." I showed him the photo I took of the porch table. It was gone, replaced by a black screen. I tried to go back 2 months later. Same trailhead, same GPS route. The path, gone. No stones, no crossroad, just empty woods. But sometimes, when I hike alone now, I see something out of place. A faint column of smoke in the distance, a shadow in the trees, and once, a perfectly set table for two. I met Sarah on the Appalachian Trail, spring of 2019. She was through hiking southbound, and I was doing a short, solo stretch through North Carolina. We ran into each other near Mac's Patch, shared a fire, swapped stories, and decided to keep hiking together for a while. By day 3, I knew I didn't want to hike without her again. We moved in together that fall, small place in Asheville, and spent the next few years planning weekend hikes and trail runs through the Smokies and Pisgah. She was fearless, loved the solitude. The deeper we were in, the happier she was. But something happened in 2023 that neither of us could explain. Something that took her from me, or maybe brought something back in her place. It was supposed to be simple. 2 nights in the Joyce Kilmer Slick Rock Wilderness, off trail, through an old ridgeline Sarah had been wanting to bushwhack for a while. Remote, dense, beautiful. We set up camp the first night near an old fire ring off a faint animal trail. No one around for miles, just us, the trees, and the wind moving through like it had a purpose. That night, I woke up to Sarah sitting bolt upright in the tent. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "What?" "Someone's calling for help." I sat up and listened. Silence. She unzipped the tent and stepped out into the dark. I grabbed my flashlight and followed. And then, we both heard it. A voice. Distant, male, weak. "Help! Help me!" It came from the trees west of us, downhill, deep. Sarah looked at me. "We can't ignore that." But something in me said we should. Still, she started walking. We followed the voice for maybe 10 minutes, careful with each step. Then it stopped. Dead silence. We waited. A few minutes later, the voice came again. Only this time, it sounded closer than it should have been, and wrong. Like someone pretending to be in pain. "Please, help me." Only now it sounded familiar, almost like Sarah's own voice. That's when we both stopped. Did that sound like me? She asked, almost laughing, but it wasn't funny. Let's go back, I said. We turned around, but the trail we followed, gone. We searched for any sign of our original path. Nothing. Every tree looked the same, the moss, the bark, the slope. It was like the forest had shifted. Then we heard it again. Sarah. Soft, from behind a tree, but not through the tree. It sounded inside them, as if the bark itself were speaking. Then another voice, mine, said, this way. Only I hadn't said anything. That's when we started running. And after what felt like an hour, we stumbled into a small clearing, a circle of low stumps and dry pine needles. In the centre was a pile of stones with a worn wooden carving on top. It looked like a crude human face with a wide hollow mouth. Sarah stared at it. She whispered, that's a law marker. A what? I read about them. Appalachian folklore, the whistlers, the mimics, things that lure hikers with voices, sometimes their own. She shivered. I stepped towards her, but she flinched like I wasn't real. We built a fire and huddled by it, barely sleeping. In the early hours, she said she had to pee and walked into the tree line. She didn't come back. I called for her, searched, panicked. Finally, just after dawn, I saw her standing by the clearing. But something was off. She was still. Too still. She didn't blink. She didn't speak. I approached slowly. Sarah? Sarah? She smiled. Not her smile. Too wide, too flat. Then she said, you came back. But in my voice. I screamed, fell backwards and ran. Eventually I made it to the ridge with a faint trail and followed it for hours until I reached a gravel service road. A hunter gave me a lift to the ranger station. They found Sarah a day later, curled up near our original campsite, dehydrated, shaken, but alive. She didn't remember anything past the voice in the trees. It's been 6 months. Sarah's different. She's distant, wakes up at night whispering to someone, talks less, sometimes just stands by the window, listening. And sometimes I hear her voice whisper my name from the backyard, even when she's asleep in bed. Last week, I found her in the woods behind our house. She was standing still, too still, smiling. When I asked her what she was doing, she just said, waiting for the real you to come back. If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. My friend disappeared in front of me, but I kept hearing him calling my name. His voice came from the trees, sometimes from the trail behind me, sometimes from places we haven't even reached yet. And the worst part, I kept answering. This happened in 2022. I was hiking a rugged offshoot of the Appalachian Trail with my friend Brian. We were 2.5 days into a 6-day trip between Hot Springs and Irwin, Tennessee. We weren't hardcore survivalists or anything, but we'd done a dozen trails together, and this one was just remote enough to be exciting. Everything was smooth the first 2 days, clear weather, perfect elevation, and no other hikers in sight. We reached a plateau and set up camp by a ridge. It was quiet, real quiet. But that's what I liked. We made freeze-dried chili, cracked a beer each, and watched the stars appear in dead silence. Just before crashing, Brian looked at me and said, "Hey, don't freak out. If anything happens out here, don't follow voices, even if it sounds like me." I laughed. "What, like banshees?" "No, it's a thing around here," he said. "Mimics. People say there's something in the woods that repeat the last words of whoever it took." I rolled my eyes and called him an idiot. He didn't laugh. The next day we passed through a winding switchback trail covered in fallen leaves and sharp descents. The trees got denser, light got thinner. Around 2 p.m, Brian's compass stopped working. Mine too. I joked about magnetic rocks, but it didn't feel funny. We stopped to eat, and I realised we haven't seen a single trail marker in miles. Brian swore he saw a blaze about 50 yards ahead, so he pushed on while I sat and checked the map. That was the last time I saw him. I yelled for him 5 minutes later. No response. I clicked the walkie. Nothing. I kept walking. 20 minutes, 30. Still, no Brian. And then I heard it. Connor. His voice, exactly his voice, from about 40 feet off trail, too far to see. I'm over here. Relief flooded me. I called back. No response. Brian, I hear you. Where are you? Over here, he said again. Same tone, same exact phrasing, over and over. I froze. There was something wrong with it. The cadence, the repetition. He didn't say anything else, just, Connor, I'm over here. Every 30 seconds, and then it came from the other side of the ridge. Connor, I'm over here. I ran, not towards it, away, straight back down the trail, or what I hoped was the trail. My GPS was glitching, there was no signal, and the compass spun like a toy. I kept hearing his voice. Connor, over here. Sometimes behind me, sometimes in front, sometimes both at once. I passed a tree with scratch marks on the bark, long ones, fresh. No claw marks, more like carvings. And when I stopped to check the map again, something brushed the back of my neck. I spun around. No one was there. And then the walkie clicked. Connor, help me. The voice cracked. It's not me. And then silence. I didn't sleep that night. I found a clearing and built a fire too high for backcountry standards. I didn't care. Around 2 a.m, the walkie clicked again. Connor. It was my voice, recorded, repeating what I yelled earlier in the day. Brian, I hear you. Where are you? Then came a low clicking noise, and then static. Then Brian's voice, quieter, trembling. Don't talk back to it. Don't answer it. It learns. I was found 2 days later by a local SAR unit. I had wandered 12 miles off trail. They didn't find Brian. Not a trace. Not even his pack. I gave my report. I left out the mimic part. They wouldn't believe me anyway. But one of the rescuers, an older guy, pulled me aside afterwards. He asked where I heard the voice. I told him. He nodded slowly. Same place another hiker went missing 2 years ago. That guy was calling for his wife over the walkie. For hours. She was already dead. 3 weeks later, a box arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside was Brian's walkie. Still on. Still charged. Still whispering. Over here. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. But sometimes, when I drive near forest, the walkie in my glove box starts crackling, even when it's turned off. And sometimes, the voice that comes through is mine. If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. At 2:16 a.m, something tapped on our tent. At 2:18, it slowly unzipped the door, but there was no one there, just claw marks in the dirt, and a shoe, still warm. This happened in July 2020, peak summer, peak isolation. 3 of us were hiking a lesser known leg of the Appalachian Trail near Rowan Mountain, Tennessee. Me, my cousin Josh, and his friend Brandon. We were taking a 5-day loop with limited access points, no shelters, tent only. The second night, We pitched a camp on a small plateau with a view of the ridgeline. Trees all around, no one else was there. Or so we thought. The first sign something was off, the forest was dead quiet. Even at night, you usually hear insects, owls, distant movement. But there was nothing, just stillness. Josh joked about wendigos, trying to lighten the mood, but Brandon, who grew up nearby, went quiet. My granddad used to say if the woods go quiet, something's already watching. At 2:16 a.m, something tapped on our tent. One light knock, then two more, then a slow slide like a hand brushing fabric. I jolted up and looked at Josh. He was awake, so was Brandon. Josh whispered, "Probably a raccoon," but it didn't feel like a raccoon. It felt like a person deliberately brushing their palm across the nylon. The tapping stopped. I held my breath. Then, from the far side of the tent, came a zip. Soft, deliberate, unmistakable. Someone was unzipping the entrance from the outside. I grabbed my flashlight and unlatched my blade. Josh counted down softly. 3, 2, 1. I ripped the zipper the rest of the way open and shined the light. No one was there, but in the dirt just outside the flap were 4 long claw marks. Not animal scratches, drag marks, like someone had dug their fingers deep. And off to the side was Brandon's boot, sitting alone, still warm inside. We called for him. No answer. Walkie, static. We spread out 50 feet. Nothing. No trail, no sign of struggle, no dropped gear, just his other boot. Josh found it half buried under pine needles with the laces still tied, like it had been placed there. We shouted until our throats hurt, then hiked back to camp, or what we thought was camp. When we reached it, our tent was gone. Gone, like it had never been there. Just a clearing, no fire pit, no gear, no signs we'd ever camped. Except one thing, a drawing, nailed to the tree, charcoal on paper. It showed 3 people sleeping in a tent, and something standing outside it. We found an old trail and hiked fast. Didn't sleep, just moved until sunrise. The path looped us back towards a known shelter waypoint. We thought we were safe. Around 3 p.m, Josh sat down to check his phone. He'd been recording audio overnight, a habit of his since a bear encounter years earlier. We played the clip from 2:16 a.m. The first tap came at 2:16:08. The brushing came at 2:16:41. At 2:18:02, the zipper started sliding. Then, silence for 11 seconds. Then, a sound. Not footsteps, not a voice. It was a sniffing noise. Close, animal-like, but bigger, hungrier. Then came a whisper. "Not him, you." We made it to the trailhead 2 days later. Never found Brandon. We reported him missing. Search teams were deployed, but nothing. Except one ranger found something 400 yards off trail. A tree, clawed deep. At the base, a hat. Brandon's. Still folded like he wore it the night before. Inside the brim, written in what looked like burned in soot, were 3 words. You looked back. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. I still don't know what was out there, but sometimes, when I camp near tree lines, I hear 2 taps on the tent, then silence, then my own voice saying, "Not him, you." If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. We were 14 miles into the trail when we found a cabin with the lights on. There were no roads, no driveways, not even a path. And the people inside said the same thing to us, over and over. You made it, you made it, you made it. But the part that still haunts me, they already had a photo of us, smiling. In October 2021, my girlfriend Taylor and I set out to hike a remote Appalachian Loop trail near the Georgia-North Carolina border, somewhere near Nantahala National Forest. She's a travel photographer and I was just helping her scout strange locations for an upcoming Haunted Hikes photo project. Our goal was to spend 4 nights off-grid and photograph anything odd. Abandoned cabins, fire towers, weird carvings, even old logging roads. We were 14 miles deep when we went off trail into what looked like an old homestead clearing. No structures, just mossy flat land and a chimney base overgrown with brush. That's when we saw the cabin. It was 100 feet away, tucked behind cedar and fir trees. Full structure, new looking roof, windows, smoke coming from the chimney. There was no trail to it, no driveway, no ATV ruts, just standing there like it had grown out of the ground. Taylor immediately pulled out her camera. "It's perfect," she said. "No one's gonna believe this is real." We got closer. Through the window, I could see movement. Someone inside, maybe 2 people, shadows. We knocked. The door opened before we touched it, and a woman smiled at us. She looked maybe 60, long grey hair, wore a linen dress and heavy boots. Behind her stood a man with a wide grin and red flannel shirt. "You made it," the woman said. "You made it," the man echoed. Taylor and I looked at each other. She gave me the go with it look. "We weren't expecting to see anyone out here," I said. "No one does," the woman said. She stepped aside. "Come in, supper's hot." Taylor hesitated, but we were starving and still had 3 hours of hiking to our planned camp. We went in. The floor was clean, the cabin smelled like stew. 5 people total, all seated at a heavy wooden table, watching us enter, smiling. Not one person blinked for a solid minute. The food was simple, potatoes, carrots, bread, but it was good, weirdly good. The older man poured us each a cup of something warm that smelled like cinnamon. "You must be tired, you've come a long way," he said. Taylor asked how long they've lived there. They didn't answer directly. The woman across from her, the only one not smiling, finally said, "Long enough to forget what we came here for." Nobody laughed. After dinner, the host asked if we would stay the night. We declined, said we needed to reach a mapped campsite before dark. That's when the younger girl, maybe 12, said something that made me sit up straight. "It's okay, you've already stayed here." Taylor looked confused. I asked what she meant. She pointed towards the fireplace mantel. There was a picture frame, and inside it was a photo of me and Taylor, smiling, standing on the porch of that same cabin. But we hadn't taken that photo. We stood, politely but firmly declined their invitation again. The woman just smiled wider. "You'll be back." We left without looking behind us. Taylor didn't speak for the first half hour of hiking. Neither did I. Eventually, she stopped mid-step and said, "I deleted all the photos of the cabin." I nodded. "Me too." She raised her phone. "I just looked again. They're all still there." We hiked 3 more hours and made camp on a ridge. No sign of the mapped campsite. We were off-grid. I kept waking up, thinking I heard voices. Around 2:44 a.m, Taylor shook me awake. "Listen," she whispered. From the woods came footsteps, slow, deliberate, just past the tree line. I clicked on my flashlight. Nothing. No sound, no movement, until a voice whispered, "You made it." We got out the next morning. We didn't speak much, just focus on following trailblazers and ignoring the constant feeling of being watched. Once we reached the car, we swore not to post anything from the trip. 3 days later, Taylor's camera SD card corrupted. She thought everything was gone. Then one image reappeared. It was the cabin, taken from above, like a drone shot, showing us on the porch, smiling, waving, except we never owned a drone and we never waved. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. We've spoken to each other about what happened that night, but sometimes I dream of that cabin, of the people smiling, of the photo on the mantle, and the last time I woke up, I had mud on my boots.